Once the manatee has been captured in the net, it is important for the team to properly handle the manatee out of the water. Effort should be made to position the manatee on its belly by slacking the net over the manatee's nostrils to allow for unrestricted respirations. If the manatee is active, the capture crew may need to restrain it before further positioning. To restrain a manatee, handlers will need to apply body weight across the entire body of the manatee, being careful not to tuck their knees against the manatee's body and always being prepared to jump away if the animal rolls onto its back. The pectoral flippers should be tucked laterally along the body to reduce the manatee's ability to roll. In most cases, especially with wild-caught manatees, the captured manatee should calm down after an initial struggle. As the manatee calms down, the crew can begin to reduce their body weight pressure on the manatee. Even if most or all the body weight pressure is removed from the manatee, the crew should continue to keep their hands on the manatee and be prepared to increase their restraining pressure if the manatee becomes active again. The crew should always be aware of any potential trauma on the manatee and avoid using body weight to restrain in these locations. Once the manatee has been properly and safely restrained, the manatee should be positioned with its head facing away from the water's edge to reduce its instinct to roll and fight to get back into the water. Whether onshore or on a boat, pulling and lifting on the net can be used to properly position the manatee. For the best leverage, the team should use the net closest to the manatee's body when positioning. Now watch and listen to the capture crew as they try to restrain a small manatee caught during a research capture in Brevard County. Sometimes smaller and younger manatees are more difficult and dangerous to restrain than larger manatees. Also note, whenever manatees are even in a little bit of water, they will struggle and thrash in attempts to get back to deeper water. After the manatee has been properly positioned and restrained, it can be transported back to the boat ramp if on the capture boat, or removed from the net if on shore. To remove the manatee from the net, the crew must first locate the float line. If the manatee rolled in the net during the capture process, it can be difficult to remove the net off the manatee. If this situation arises, the net roll will need to be worked to the head or tail by getting slack from the piles of nets near the manatee. Once the float line has been found, it can be worked over the top of the manatee and then over the head and tail. Once the net has been cleared off the top of the manatee, rolling straps can then be worked under the manatee. Starting from the head or the tail, and the tail is most often easier, the strap is slipped under the body by 2 crew members and work to the mid-body in a sawing motion. For typical adult manatees, 2 straps may be enough, but for larger manatees, 3 or more straps can be used. Manatees can be loaded into a stretcher in a variety of ways. The most commonly used technique is rolling the manatee into the stretcher. For this technique, the stretcher is positioned lengthwise next to the manatee, and half of it is bunched next to the manatee's body, with enough stretcher laid out to support the head and the tail. Handlers on the opposite side of the manatee from the stretcher then step on the rolling strap on their side and in a coordinated effort use the strap as leverage to pull the manatee onto its side to almost 90 degrees. Handlers on the stretcher side then shove half of the stretcher under the manatee. The straps are then relaxed and the manatee is brought back to its belly. The roll is then reversed. Once the manatee is rolled up on its opposite side, the stretcher is pulled tight. If this process results in the manatee in the middle of the stretcher, then the stretcher was positioned properly during the rolling. If not, the manatee can be rolled again, or the crew can use the straps to lift and reposition the manatee, which leads us to the second stretchering technique. For smaller manatees, or in cases where rolling a manatee may put excessive pressure on a wound, the crew may decide to use the rolling straps to lift the manatee directly to the stretcher. This again is a coordinated effort with one crew member lifting each end of the rolling strap and other crew members supporting the head and the tail. The manatee is then picked up and moved to a stretcher that is laid out nearby. The final technique can be used when the manatee is in shallow water and is not very active. This technique is simply floating the manatee over the stretcher or working the stretcher under the manatee while the manatee is in shallow water. Once the manatee has been positioned properly in the stretcher, the handlers can then move the manatee to the transport truck or workup area. Physical strength should be divided on all sides of the manatee, with the strongest handlers near the middle. Manatee stretchers have loops along the sides and sometimes at either end that can be used for lifting. Moving the manatee is a coordinated effort that should be directed by one person. It can be helpful for the director to explain and point out to the handlers where and how the manatee will be moved. The manatee is offloaded from the boat, tail first, and spun 180 degrees once it has been cleared off the back of the boat. For larger animals, or for longer distances, the handlers may need to rest between movements. Once at the back of the transport truck, the manatee is placed diagonally on the lift gate. The lift gate is then raised to the level of the transport box, and the manatee is positioned on the floor of the transport box on a closed cell phone pad. If the manatee is to be worked up on land, a designated workup location is established and the manatee is placed on a closed cell phone pad. Handlers can provide basic care and monitoring during a workup or transport. General restraint and handling procedures are still applied. Handlers should always be prepared for a manatee to become active. When the weather is warm, manatees can be kept cool by placing them in the shade and washing them with buckets of water or spraying them with a pump sprayer. When the weather is cold, manatees can be wrapped in thermal blankets or standard blankets. A resting manatee should breathe 3 to 5 times every 5 minutes. Breaths can be stimulated by handlers pouring water over the nostrils. This simulates the manatee breaking the surface to breathe. If available, a thermometer probe can be placed under the manatee's upper lip to monitor body temperature. Ideal manatee body temperature should be between 92 and 97 degrees Fahrenheit. The heart rate can also be monitored using a stethoscope between the pectoral flippers. A resting manatee should have a heart rate of 50 to 80 beats per minute.